Welcome back to the channel, everybody. It's your host, Crypto Coffee, with a very popular guest, Waters Above, very highly requested. He's back to fulfill the prophecy of Bitcoin, Ethereum, Hex, whatever it might be. We're going to do a pre-recorded video today because I want it to pop up on the video section of my YouTube channel. That's one reason, rather than the live stream section. And, I've been following you for a long time, Waters, and I saw your last video about, you touched on Hex a little bit, mentioned we could be going as low as 0.3 of a penny, which does seem reasonable. We made it to 0.4, why not 3? But it's my life is all Hex PulseChain related. I'm sure there's a lot of numerology there. The last full moon we had was the SEC announcement, pretty much, maybe not exactly on the full moon, but maybe a day before. And so that was a big shock to our ecosystem. And so we're going to be talking about a lot about that later in the video. But first, I just want to say, what's been up, dude? How you been? How you handling the bear? And what's going on in general in your life?
I'm doing amazing, doing better every day. I am definitely excited to reconnect with you. I know it's been some time. A lot of the things that we spoke about on the last time we connected actually came to fruition. And again, it's really helpful for me to be able to look into a project that I don't personally know nearly as much as you do or your community, but still have just an unbiased ability to look at the charts and my decoding system and determine what will come next. And hopefully that's been helpful to you and your community.
Yeah, there's been so much overlap, people bridging over between both of our communities. I think a lot of people really like what you have to say. They like your opinion. And so, my opinion is one thing, but I'm kind of a permeable, always optimistic, trying to be realistic and optimistic at the same time, looking at facts and fundamentals, but not so much technicals. I understand you're a fan of like the Fibonacci and moon cycles. And, if I had to pick anything, right, basic support and resistance, basic Fibonacci supports, those tend to work as a magnet. Moon cycles are recent for me. Higher volatility at new moons and full moons is something that sounds woo-woo to some people, but you look at the chart and you're like, damn, I guess I can't really argue with that. For whatever reason, you talk to medics, you talk to policemen, and they say the same thing. I don't know why, but people get a little crazier on the full moon for whatever reason. So, it's just a weird world we're living in. So, but I saw you did a full decode on the Hex and Richard Heart ecosystem, on Richard's name in particular. When you did that, was that before the SEC news came out?
It was a couple days after. And again, I was going to wait on doing it till I had the time to carve a way for it. But I'll admit this, and maybe this is a good thing for me to admit. The content that I put out about Hex actually doesn't get as much traction as something perhaps like XRP, and that's not what I'm about. I'm not trying to get clicks here or any of that, but it's just something I've noticed that maybe my community isn't as many people from the Hex community as perhaps, some other channels that are out there. And whoever is in my community that's from the Hex ecosystem are coming from, for instance, me and you connecting, or me having the interview that I did with Silver the Antidote. So I don't personally cover it in every single piece of content that I put out. And it's mostly just people that have found me through you and through anyone that I've communicated with. So I wasn't even going to do the decode, but then this specific event happened of the SEC coming after Richard Heart. And I thought, okay, this is a good opportunity for me to dive into my system and see if I'm finding any patterns. And what do you know? I found a ton of them as usual. And I tried my best to not get very complicated. I wanted to simplify as much as I could. And I also believe I shared some really important words of wisdom in the beginning of that video. So if anyone goes to my YouTube channel, they'll know the video that Crypto Coffee is talking about. It's just called Richard Heart Decoded. And I believe the beginning of that video is actually the most important part of that video. It's me just sharing where I stand regarding my investment thesis and all of these individualized one token communities, and I'm just kind of giving my truth. And I believe it was very collaborative and very, it just clears the air, because some people think I'm a hater when it comes to some of these communities or projects. And some people think I'm a maxi. And in actuality, I'm just the technical analyst and a decoder. And I feel that that's what makes me helpful to people like you, perhaps, or people that are just focusing on one particular project.
Yeah, well, it's a very emotionally fueled industry, right? Like you say the price is going down, you say, hey guys, high probability you might have a near-term price action to the downside, and people are going to hate you for that, right? Because
Yeah.
you're just telling them what you're guessing, what you're speculating based on your previous knowledge and pattern recognition. So, yeah, just because you've said, hey, price is going to go down, doesn't make you a hater. That should be obvious.
Exactly.
You've also said
Exactly.
price is going to go up, right? You called
Yeah.
pretty perfectly the 10 to 12 cent range top when the PulseX V3 testnet went out, and that
And
was pretty
that was
remarkable.
also that was done on us collaborating. It was me sharing analysis with you directly before that even came to fruition. I remember it
Yeah, that
vividly.
was in what,
I
May?
shared that so people can go back and watch that. And I talked about this based off of the Wyckoff method. So Richard Wyckoff passed away almost 100 years ago, and I believe his methodology still works to this day, even in the most volatile asset class, and within the most volatile asset class being altcoins. So it's incredible how well this works to determine pivot points in the market when a market is um, setting up for a bull trap or setting up for a bear trap. And when I saw what happened with Hex into the end of 2022, that was clear as day to me, an oversold chart that was setting up for a bear trap. And that's where we anticipate what I call an automatic rally. And that was the call up to 12 cents. It was that range between 10 to 14 cents specifically. And I believe we hit 13 on several charts. But the point here was that I was never bearish. I'm just ahead of it, and I'm sharing this methodology to prepare people. So it's funny because you're right. When I started to talk about these ideas of bigger corrections after 12 cents, people were crucifying me. And I was like, well, this is confusing because you were happy when I was sharing the upside target, and now you're mad at me when I'm sharing. And it's like, then you clearly aren't here to learn.
Right.
And
That's
that's why I
certain people.
started out my last video that way. I started it out by kind of just clearing the air and telling people where I stand, and that I'm more of an asset if you visualize me in that way. And I'm not trying to be an enemy at all. I'm an educator.
Yeah.
That's really it.
Well, look, man, you're gonna get hates spewed at you from every angle in the bear market. Trust me, because it's this is people's livelihoods, right? And it's like, well, prices are down, people's net worth, they see it dropping. You know, mine's down as well. I'm a holder of Hex and PulseChain and PulseX.
Right.
It doesn't look so good, yeah, on the numbers, right? But I've got long term faith in you know, everything rebounding in the bull, long term faith in what, you know, the SEC fate is going to be. But it's a very emotional game that we're playing. So yeah, it's just the nature of the beast. And I know you mentioned so your last video, right? 20,000 views. That's no small deal, right? That's a lot of views. It might be a couple thousand less than you normally get on Ripple, but people want to know. Richard Hart is a hot topic right now. You also mentioned
Yeah.
it's a one coin community, but recently it's transformed into kind of a 3 to 4 coin community if you want to count PulseChain and PulseX
Correct.
along with that as well. I guess I want to ask, does that news, the recent PulseChain launch, does that affect your outlook on, you know, where the Hex community, Richard Hart community is going to end up? All right, you're back.
Yep. Thank goodness this is is recorded. Right? Yeah. Sorry, brother.
It's all good.
Your last question was,
it was basically about, you know, so there's PulseChain, which just launched. There's the Hex news about Richard being sued. You know, SEC violation, slap on the wrist, fine, whatever it might be. I'm just wondering if you see this new ecosystem transforming from a Hex to a multi-coin ecosystem. Do you see that affecting the outcome in any way? I guess from a technical point of view, because now there's not just one chart to follow, right? It gets a little more complex.
Absolutely. And that's a great question. And it's something that people have been asking me a lot lately about this PulseChain introduction as part of the conversation. And I've been told by a lot of people that are in this community that many are just getting out of pHex completely and moving into pHex. Is that correct?
There was a big span of that, especially in the first month or two, where people were like, "Oh, I'm just going to go use the cheaper version of Hex," right? And it's like, to a degree that makes sense. And then there's this big internal argument of, well, you can't abandon eHex, and it doesn't make any sense to just call one dead because everybody's still looking at the eHex chart. You know, eHex is on Ethereum. Ethereum is tried and true. A lot of people might not want to experiment with PulseChain, but they might want exposure to Hex on Ethereum still. So there was this big argument, you know, and now, you know, everyone's attention is always focused on what's the next thing, what's the next FUD, right? Now it's all about the SEC. 2 more months, it'll be something completely different. But yeah, there was a big outflow of certain people choosing to just value pHex more. And now you can buy both versions of Hex on the PulseChain network because people are bridging in their eHex over to PulseChain, and you can actually buy both versions on PulseX, the trading platform.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's a camp of people that thinks of and that values pHex higher, and we can see that on the charts. In that, you know, pHex is literally double the price of an eHex right now. The PulseChain native Hex is about 1 penny, whereas the Ethereum native Hex is about half a penny.
Yeah, so I think that's where the conversation starts, right? It's like if that is the case and there's an exodus out of eHex and all the money does actually want to flow into pHex, well, that could very well be what we are going to see moving forward. Just, you know, a continuation of a death spiral on eHex. I mean, it's already down 99%. And that's actually what I was going to say to kick things off, but I thought that would, prefacing as I did earlier, would be more effective in my answer. So we have yet to see many projects that have had a 98% correction recover into new all-time highs in the entire existence of altcoins. Now, I'm not sure how specific I could get here with this data, but it's something that once you start seeing a 96% or more loss, almost nothing has recovered to price discovery to the upside. What we have seen is very elongated, dramatic, automatic rallies from a macro perspective. So let me speak in plain English, okay? If we were to look at the Hex chart and we could all agree that the prior all-time high was somewhere around 56 cents, like 50 to 60 cents, and we are currently trading at 0.005 cents, then this would mean that we would most likely not get to a new all-time high on eHex, but we could potentially hit maybe 10 cents again. Now, that would be an insane return for anyone who's buying in today. I just want to make, if people's stomachs hurt by what I just said, by there not being a new all-time high for Hex in the future, just remember I followed that up by saying the next move could be a 2,000% gain. So by no means little returns. Now, do you want to put your faith in the statistics of this going up to new all-time highs? Well, that would be the rare, you know, bet. But still, at least if Bitcoin is going to move into a new cycle and we're going to have what's called an alt season, I would assume as long as this eHex does not get completely sacrificed, it has an opportunity to do a macro automatic rally, which could bring you up to the 8 cent, maybe 11 cent range. Now, if we move over to pHex, we're not banking on data at all because we have a chart that only goes back to the middle of May. And if I was to look specifically at this well, it would be Hex on the Pulse chain. So Hex, let me pull up the chart actually, because this might be able to give people a visual. I believe you should be seeing it now. Let me know.
Gotcha. Yeah, I can pull this up.
Yeah, so if I was to look at this very limited amount of data, again, remember that with my analysis, I like to at least have a year of data to be able to really feel confident in what I'm about to tell you. But with the limited data that I have, and again, like I've been doing this for a while now, so I'm really able to determine these pivots. What I'm seeing is only a 84% correction from this move over here back on May 28th down to this recent move on August 2nd. And this I'll break down step by step if you'd like me to give my technical analysis on this particular coin, but it has not reached these 95, 96, 97% corrections targets. So this is more likely to have a new all-time high than eHex. And also, if there's really a truth to the fact that people are leaving eHex to go into pHex, well, then that would also support that idea. And now you're talking about
the one interesting thing that might drag eHex along with pHex for the ride is just liquidity bonding between the two. So right now, what you have is a situation where there's a significant amount of liquidity bonding eHex and pHex, and you could swap one for another.
Mhm.
into a deep pool, right? So if pHex goes up, it does drag the eHex price up to a degree. Now, whether or not, it blasts out of, past 50 cents, yeah, I agree. It's much more likely to happen for pHex, but a lot of people are still holding both, like such as myself. I'm not selling the eHex that why would I want to sell the low if it's just going to go along for the ride on the next bull anyway? But I hear what you
Correct.
mean. It is very unlikely. Also, just wanted to point out, oddly enough, Cardano was one of those 99% drop to new all-time high cryptos. Out of all the cryptos, it is unlikely, right? But you've got like 4 or 5 examples, and Cardano was surprisingly one of
Exactly.
them. Yeah.
You do have examples. So I hope that what I said before was very clear, that it's very rare, but we do have we do have examples, absolutely, of a 99% correction that's gone on to price discovery. And in that event, we did not see too much price discovery. Like if you were to look at the difference between the $1.30 all-time high in Cardano back in 2018 versus a $3 Cardano in September 2021, that's not like what Bitcoin did. Bitcoin went on to fucking 20x the prior all-time high. So yeah, like I mean, in this amount of scenarios that we're working with, like it's still super rare. But yeah, you're correct. Thank you for pointing that out.
Sure thing.
Um,
So you've got
so
these
I have the
lines.
chart up right now. I don't want to confuse people on too much of what's going on here. It's very scrunched up, but essentially, I'm looking at a linear chart right now. I have a basic fib pull from the current high to the swing low, and this is showing you a 4.236 of around 16 cents. And that's typical for a pulse to the upside. When we get these price discovery moments in the alt market, you tend to see that be the first exaggerated move. And now you can see much, much higher than the 4236. But I'm just kind of giving people an idea here that, there's definitely a possibility for a 10-cent plus pHex just on a basic fib pull. But unless you have any questions right now, I could give a very brief analysis on pHex if you'd like.
Go right ahead.
Okay. So I'm going to put these fibs back on a log scale. And what we're looking at right now is a logarithmic chart with this on this fib setting. It has a very important box right here at the bottom that you need to turn on called fibs levels based on log scale. Just a very basic pull from swing high to swing low. And I marked off this 1 cent area. And if anyone watched my last video, I didn't talk about pHex for too long, but I did talk about it. And I said that this 1 cent area is crucial because if you can't get back above it, and if you start to treat it as a resistance, then you could actually see this shit keel over pretty hardcore. I mean, this is by no means finished correcting. I'm just being straight up with people right now. This is kind of the way that I do it. There's no time for beating around the bush with the truth about money. Otherwise, you're being lied to. So from a technical perspective, if you get rejected off this 236, it's typically a nice support level, but there's weakness here. And I'll show you the weakness. You have this really drastic move because of what happened with the SEC versus Richard Hart. Then you have a spring action, kind of this is a fake out, clearly, because this was also short-lived, but it was rejected off the 0.5 fib. People need to be aware that this looks like a dead cat bounce in the making. And dead cat bounces typically lead to another leg lower. But I don't want to get super technical here. I just want to let people know that if a technical support level is being treated as a resistance, well, then you want to look to where you were holding support, which when I zoom out, we have a problem here. There is no fucking chart history. So there's thin air between 008 and forever to the downside. Like there is no chart history. So as a technical analyst, I need to be direct here. This thing needs to hold these sub 1 penny levels, but it would be more beneficial for it to get back above a penny. As long as it trades below a penny, it looks scary.
Can you in any way just use the eHex chart history back before the chain split and somehow apply that to, pHex levels? Because before May 13th, they were really like a conjoined twin. And then it split off like an amoeba, basically. So another thing people are doing too is some people are tracking the eHex plus the pHex price. And they're saying, well, because a lot of people are just holding the same amount that they were before the fork, the combined price is, 1.5 cents, let's say. And then in that case, you're down 97% as opposed to 99.
What was that
Oh,
exactly that you wanted me to
oh,
look at?
sorry. Did you cut out for a second? So I'm just saying that certain people are looking at the combined value of eHex and pHex, right? Which would be about 1.5 pennies, still putting us at a negative 97% dip. Still bad. But I guess my main question is, can you use any previous support levels on the eHex or the price of hex before the fork, back when these two things were conjoined? And can you apply those in your mind to a brand new chart history such as pHex?
Yeah, I would like to do things like that, but that kind of goes against the theory of determining when your selling climax will be. And what that means in plain English is, when is all the selling pressure coming to a finality? So when is your selling pressure being just exhausted, is what I like to say. And on none of these charts do I see exhausted selling pressure. This thing can keep going more and more and more. Like, there is no support at this point. I could get theoretical, of course. I like to get theoretical. That's kind of my game. But I believe what I said before was probably the most.
Hey, you cut out for a second. Are you there?
Oh, really? Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. So you cut out at I can get theoretical for a second.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that I could get theoretical on where this thing's going to go, but I mean, that would probably be based off of how the SEC makes their next chess move against Richard Hart. Unless the retail really steps in, like unless the people in this project really have conviction and they care and they want to put fresh fiat in this asset, or they want to start de-risking their exposure to whatever else they're invested in the market, whatever other speculative assets, and roll it over into Hex. But it seems that the people that are in Hex are very diehard blockchain crypto fans, and they're very diehard about Richard Hart's mission statement and what he, represents and the products that he's designed. So, I mean, they're probably overexposed to this project in a very unsafe way. And that's why you're seeing this cascading effect of you having a sell-off after a sell-off after a sell-off, no matter what updates come out. I believe there's this movie coming very soon, like tomorrow, right?
Oh, it's already
What's
out,
your
actually.
okay? And it'll be played in movie theaters when?
So it's already premiered all across the country. Actually, I've seen it twice now. It's been around for 2 weekends. It did pretty well at the box office. Sold out city to city. Even doing some showings in Ireland and the UK now, I believe. But yeah, I mean, it was a big deal, but it wasn't like, in my mind, it was never going to be a news event worth, that we would see on the chart, just because, if we're being honest, who's going to see this movie, right? It's people that are already in Hex, that know about Hex, maybe
Correct.
some new people that they bring along, like friends and family, whatever. But I don't think we get any reasonable pump off of the movie until it hits a mainstream streaming service like a Hulu or Netflix. But it was definitely a good start to the whole thing.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was gonna say. Like, I think that I had way too many people from the Hex community probably 2 months ago that were saying that my theory of us going down into 003 was impossible because of this movie launch. And I
Mm.
just I didn't understand. Again, I think it's people who lack analysis and the understanding of how charts work and how assets work. And you could just quickly look at volume and you could see that, well, there's a discrepancy here. Where would this come from? Where would this bullish energy actually come from? Like, it needs to have fresh money showing up, and it's not. But I can't really fully answer what you were asking before because it's not my style. I would just be pure on theory, and I always bring back my main theory to Wyckoff method. And to me, this hasn't found a bottom yet. I still think that there's more potential downside for both pHex and eHex.
Now, do you mind if I pull up Wyckoff method so you can describe that for a minute? Let me.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Feel free to pull up like an accumulation schematic or something.
Here's a Google image. Let me see. This is what a Wyckoff accumulation zone would look like. I mean, how would you describe that to someone that doesn't know?
So this is showing you a couple things. It's showing you moving from accumulation into a distributional top, will then bring you into what we call a bear market, right? So it's showing you an overextended phase. These tops are very elusive. And if I had to make people who are brand new to this have a very just crash course like tutorial, I would tell people first and foremost that Wyckoff is, to me, is the market compass. If you know Wyckoff method, you're going to be able to figure out where you're currently at whilst everyone else is pretty lost. And that's the beauty of Wyckoff method, is you could determine where are you. So I like to call it the market compass. And what I don't personally use what you're looking at right now, because it would be teaching 3 different to 4 different things all at once. And that's way too confusing to somebody who's brand new. But this is great because this does show you the phases and going from accumulation or what he's calling a markup to a distribution. So right now, we can look at this distribution part of what you have on the chart to the top right, and you could look at the pHex chart and you could see what's going on in the July, August, September of 2021 phase. That's clearly a distributional top. And it shows you it exactly step by step. This would just be much more long term when you're looking at the Wyckoff method broken down in the picture you're seeing compared to crypto, because everything that's happening in crypto is happening much, much faster, right? Whilst we have, and again, I don't want people to take this so literally, but in crypto, we have market cycles that are like 3.5 to 4 years. And then about after that 4.5 year point, it's pretty obvious that we're in a new phase of the cycle. Whilst the stock market tends to have like 7-year to 8-year cycles. And this is always denoted by the most historic market crashes or bull runs. And again, we have 100 years of data that shows us this. This is what's made my work really popular, actually, because I talked about the 7-year cycle, probably talked about it a lot with you. And we are seeing that the last 7-year cycle, which we just lived through, was no different than any other 7-year cycle. We hit an all-time high right near the beginning of that 7th year. Then we started to have a huge correction during that 7th year, right into Hebrew New Year. It happens rinse, repeat, going back over 100 years. So to tell people where we're at right now in this chart, I believe we are either in the very, very beginning of it, very beginning, heading towards that thing called selling climax. But the reason I wouldn't want to use this example is because it's cutting off how they're connected from distribution to accumulation. It's showing you from accumulation to distribution. So it's hard for people to visualize exactly where Hex is at right now because it would have to be through a reverse. But if I want to make things very simple for people, again, you see this move where it's leaving accumulation and it's starting to enter this thing called markup. You'll know for Hex when it's doing that, when it starts to approach levels that are higher than where it was at in March 2023. Now, I don't think we're going to do that. I really don't think that pHex is going to move into a new all-time high in the next cycle. It's possible, but like where's the money coming from? I just don't think retail would have enough to do it. Back when Hex had a much, much lower market cap, sure. I mean, it had that type of energy behind it. But if you were to compare market cap of where it was at 50 something cents versus where it would need to be like $1, I think you would have to have a mass amount of adoption. And the only people with that sort of money would have to be some big players. And I think as we move through hyperinflation, when we make it through this next BRICS conference, that's going to be in about a week, we could be potentially hearing the starting point of the globalism talk, but it'll be exoteric. It'll be directly to your face. We have the Euro Central Bank moving forward with potentially CBDCs by October. Like, big money is already kind of rolling out the carpet and the landscape of what they're doing next. And it doesn't seem that they're interested in something like Hex.
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
just be honest here.
The powers that be, of course, they're not going to want self-sovereign money that can't be, tracked and that's not centrally managed by them for the most part. So yeah, that'll be an uphill battle for true decentralized cryptocurrency versus, the CBDCs. Correct. And that's a whole different thing. But I mean, this is Wyckoff. I'll take this up.
I have one more thing to say, and it's a question to you. Actually, it's like part statement, part question. Do you believe with this exodus out of pHex and a lot of this negativity that's come from the sell-off, just purely from the continuation of the sell-off, that it's made people that were once supporters of Richard Hart actually switch. Like they've switched up and now they don't like him anymore. Again, I'm just finishing off the statement and then it's more of a question because I know you know way more than I do. But I have had client calls, people that have paid me for calls to help them out with this whole idea here. And basically investment theory, building portfolios, etc. And a lot of them were overexposed to Hex. A lot of them have been sitting in it since it was 30 cents. And they're absolutely pissed off. They've told me straight and direct that they used to believe in this thing. Now they are in disbelief. Like they believe it's a scam. Again, this is not my words. This is people that are coming to me to hire me to help. So I'm just there as like a therapist sometimes. And these people are really not happy about it. And it doesn't seem to be that they're rare. There's many, many, many hardcore Hex fans that just don't give a shit about it anymore. And they're almost going out of their way now to be public enemies of it on their social platforms. So do you think the maybe the switch up in popularity, like it seems Richard used to be like a god to some people. And now like when you look at these charts, that doesn't seem to be the case.
Yeah, so there's a lot of points to make in that. It's first of all, I think the people that looked at Richard as a like holy figure, I mean, they're gonna have the hardest time with the dip because you know, they didn't believe in the coin because they actually believed in it. They believed in it because they relied on Richard or someone else to tell them to believe in it, and that's just not the way you should be doing
it's called
things,
religion.
Yeah, and that there's a big part in that in the movie as well of people that treated this like a cult, which I've always tried to take a more, you know, not that approach. That approach always worried me to a degree. It's like, guys, you know, we shouldn't be putting all this trust in one guy. He's just a guy. He's not perfect either. You know, he created these things, but now it's up to the community to kind of carry this forward. And I understand that people are probably angry just that the prices are down, which they're down in everything, right? If you were holding Solana from the top, you're down 90%. You know, there's a lot of different coins we could talk about that are down. So absolutely. In a way, this is also just the market depression and anger phase, right? The different, you go from like denial, depression, anger, and then you need people to be maximally frustrated before you can really go back up. You know, the sellers have to be totally exhausted. So it's not surprising that people are angry, but a lot of the people that I know that are the long-term thinkers, the hardcore, I guess you could say the hexicans that actually do have multi-year staking ladders, I don't see a lot of that same, like I see, you know, exhaustion. I see depression and maybe a little anger, but a lot of these people that have their multi-year ladders that believed in this product for, you know, a decade or more, I'm not seeing so much of that. Maybe it's just my particular people I follow on my news feed, but look, a lot of people I think just didn't realize that this wasn't a get rich in a year or two thing, right? Like it's a get rich slow scheme, as with all crypto, right? It's time in the market rather than timing the market. And so, you know, if people wanted to get out, I hope they would have gotten out by now. But there's a difference in, I think, the types of people that got into Hex, where a lot of people got in it because they saw other people get rich and they just said, hey, I want a piece of the action. And then there's some people that said, I look at this like a long-term savings account where I can stake, you know, 2 years, 2.5 years, 3 years from now. And, you know, just assuming the price is higher than it is now, I'll be making yield and, you know, I can dollar cost average my way in on these dips. And that's just a completely different framework, I think, in which to look at this. So, yeah, I understand that, you know, it is down massively, right? And so people hopefully the sellers are becoming exhausted, because that's the only way we can break back out is by rinsing out all the non-believers, right? All the people that don't think this is going to happen. It's just another strange scenario on top of that.
I think it took Bitcoin like 3 cycles to do what you just said, by the way. People just don't realize it because we're in 2023 now and people forget that Bitcoin's been trading since it was sub a penny. But yeah, what you just said is some serious wisdom, actually. And people disregard the past chart of Bitcoin quite often. That there is like a belief cycle that you need to go through, and it's dramatic.
It's funny, right? Because when the prices are high, you feel like, oh my God, I'm the smartest, like I am a genius, blah, blah, blah. And then you feel like this is the way of the future. And yeah, you do need to get back to what is the fundamental value of these things. It's not just, you know, oh, Richard's going to kick everyone's ass and I'm on team Richard. It's like, I'm not even pro calling it the Richard Hart community, right? I never even liked calling it that. You could look at old tweets I've made and I'm like, guys, we should just call this the Hex and PulseChain community, right? We shouldn't we shouldn't like have this holy figure be the leader. And I think now that you see Richard take more of a backseat approach, he still tweets and everything, but he's not live streaming as much. I think this is the way all founders eventually should go, like Vitalik included, you know, Charlie Lee, all these people. If you notice, if you look at the history, usually the founders are way more active in the beginning of the coin's life cycle because they need to nurture somewhat of a community. They need to educate the public about, you know, what it does. They need to get builders on board. And now that we've got all that, I see tons of builders on PulseChain. I see people building stuff around Hex all day. I think now he can finally relinquish some of that authoritarian control, I guess. Not like he really had control, but that top-down mindset can be somewhat more decentralized in terms of the community itself. And so I'm excited to see that forming right now while we rinse out the people that wanted to get rich quick, that unfortunately might have bought at 30 cents, but, you know, didn't want to DCA down. You know, if they didn't believe in this long term, you know, you got to wait for another cycle to see the returns, right? And so we're just in a bear market now, is what I've been saying, is like all the prices are down. You have a very unique case with Hex in that now there's two charts, right? So a lot of people that are just looking at one chart are only getting half the picture. You know, I do believe that they're both going to go up. Maybe eHex doesn't break all-time high. I would like pHex to break its all-time high, and it might take a long time, right? It might take till 2025 for that to happen. But it is this unique scenario that I think a lot of people on social media, they're only exposing one version of the chart and not mentioning that we now have two parts of a whole, essentially.
Yeah, and like I shared earlier, I do believe that we'll see an all-time high on pHex in the next cycle. I'm more confident in that than I am confident in a new all-time high for eHex.
Sure.
On the eHex chart, I have very low confidence of an all-time high. I'm high confidence of at least 8 cents to 10 cents, which I would consider a life-changing play for a lot of people. You know, most people in last bull run did not get 1,000% returns on any of their investments. And believe it or not, when you start to look at diversified portfolios, which I've done portfolio review, at least 1,000 portfolio reviews. So I've looked into many people across the world in all different economies, different backgrounds, different ages, etc. And the more diversified the portfolio is, the worse the returns were. So it's just common that, you know, if you have a simplified portfolio and you're patient and you have some investment thesis, some exit strategy, and you apply it when the market shows you that it's time, and you don't just get scared and have greed because you think it'll keep going up, you know, you could be extremely profitable. So I'm sitting here today telling people that, you know, a 2,000% gain off of where we're at right now in eHex is still in the cards. And I know a lot of people might take that as me punching them in the gut because they're hearing no new all-time high. But at the same time, I'm actually saying, well, if you keep your greed out of this and you look at it for what it is, you know, that's actually incredible returns. And I also would say that don't put all your eggs in the basket of pHex because it lacks chart history. And it's also being part of this post-SEC lawsuit kind of, well, it's not over, but you know what I mean? Now that we have this SEC shit going on, I've been through that directly with Ripple because I've been following along Ripple before the SEC case came in. I was an investor in Ripple when it was 17 cents, 16 cents. I had all my rhyme and reason to, but I also had an investment thesis built around de-risking it heavily. So it wasn't like this whole, like I'm riding it till some arbitrary upside target that doesn't exist. I was a trader of the coin. I know your take on trading. What I mean by this is, like, I know points of which I should de-risk to take some profits and get my chips off the gambling casino table. And I know when, you know, things are oversold where it's a great time to consider accumulation. So when I say trading, I'm talking about a long-term. I'm not talking about, you know, in and out day trading by any means. But my point here is that I've lived through the SEC thing. And back when that went down, it was the same reaction we got in the Ripple community and the XRP community that we saw with this Hex community. It's equally as diehard, huge community, like really on the internet, especially, you know, in social media, forums, Telegram, you name it. And a lot of the initial reaction to it was panic selling. And then also this whole denial thing of the case is going to be over soon. A lot of people do not understand the US legal system and how that framework operates. Their whole thing is let's milk this as long as we possibly can to steal taxpayer money. Like that's really all they give a shit about. So to tell the truth of truths, we didn't even finish the Ripple case as of recently. It was just deemed non-security regarding XRP, but the company Ripple Labs, they're not done with. Like this case is still going, and that happened back in 2021. Like,
Yeah.
this is a long fucking time. So like I told people in my last video with the Richard Hart Decoded, like strap yourselves in, guys. Like, but one other thing to mention, and it's a big debunking piece to a lot of the mythology around the XRP community, and where I think I could be very helpful to the Hex community, is back when the SEC case happened, we immediately saw a crash, like a flash crash, and then we actually saw price increase past where it was prior to the lawsuit. So even during the lawsuit, you could have an incredible bullish rally, a relief rally. So this is like, you need to be elusive about how you're taking this all in, but just remind yourselves that this does not make Hex any longer following the typical protocol of Bitcoin all-time high equals everything else hits an all-time high. That's not how this shit works anymore. And I believe this is probably the last cycle where that shit will even work at all for anything, riding the Bitcoin wave. So people that are in these communities, they need to be open to this, because when you get these moments, you need to de-risk. You can't just keep holding and holding and holding forever. Otherwise, you're going to be complaining and complaining and complaining about the project forever. And what kind of life is that?
Well, it depends on the person too. Like I say, like if it's going to keep you up at night, and you don't have the stomach, or if you don't have a long-term look, or, because some people are buying this dip, right? And that could work out in 3-4 years, right? Or maybe 2 years. Who knows? But yeah, it is. We're definitely entering this different paradigm where you look at the SEC news and Ripple. Yeah, Ripple did a 10x after the SEC news came out, after their crash on the news. They also got delisted off a lot of places, because that's one important distinction between Hex and PulseChain. They're not really listed on as many places as Ripple was. So there's less, you can't delist what was never listed, right? So that's a small difference. And on top of that, Ripple was on its third cycle, right? Being a 10-year-old coin at this point. Hex is 3 years old and PulseChain is 3 months old. So the novelty of the coins, I think, matters a bit too, just in perspective of the ratio of people that have heard about it now to people that will hear about it in the future. Yeah. Just as simple as that. That makes me bullish on the whole ecosystem, just because there's a lot more runway. They're a lot newer. You got builders, you've got content creators, community is still, thriving. The social metrics are actually diverging from the price. I see social metrics going up while price goes down, which is interesting. I don't see, I'm not in other communities, but I would venture to guess that doesn't usually happen, right? So all these things are just kind of making this ecosystem, in my mind, a new paradigm that it's hard to try to relate it to Bitcoin, right? Maybe in the first cycle, I like that you mentioned that was kind of a belief cycle, even for Bitcoin, right? You had people just libertarian diehards that believed in the tech, right? And then those had to be rinsed out, and kind of the market has to humble everybody to the maximum degree. It's almost like we have to repent for our sins, like the euphoria.
Well, I have a question about a statement you just made, because it seems that Richard Hart himself has almost used what Bitcoin has done before to support why what's going on with Hex is like nothing to see here, guys, because like we've done this, that, and the third, and it's always been backed by some sort of data with Bitcoin. And I've had this stuff shared with me. I can't be specific because I'm not a direct follower of Richard Hart, but I've seen moments where people have shared like, well, if Bitcoin's done it, then this can happen. And it's kind of based off the same thing that they've perhaps learned from Richard. I don't know, through live streams or tweets or whatever, but.
Well, I think he's referring to the possibility of the price potential, right? I mean, he said, look, if Bitcoin can go from a penny to $69,000, crypto is the highest appreciating asset in all mankind. He also highlights, Ethereum doing a 10,000x in 2.5 years. and these things are all like, these are true. They have happened. And I think he's just trying to say, look, guys, you're in an asset class where things can go into this blue sky zone where they appreciate faster than everything else. And it's kind of just life-changing wealth generating opportunity. I don't know so much if like he's comparing the hex chart, it's hard to say, right? Like,
yeah, because Hex isn't all about just the price. It's also the staking protocol and everything else that's going on in the background. So it's much more complicated than just something like Bitcoin.
well, yeah, it does a little more than Bitcoin.
Like it has way more incentives for those types of people that want those incentives, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it was a bragging point on the way up, right? It was a bragging point.
And exactly. That was kind of another assumption I made, because I seem to be aware of his fiery energy and kind of like the outrage effect of him. Like he'll find ways to, yeah, I get it. I get it without being disrespectful, because I don't want to go there at all. Like I see it for what it is. But I guess, that's kind of built on one of the things that I perhaps asked you in the past was, does this guy's marketing tactic and the way he maneuvers about this world, will it continue to work as perhaps it did for like an Andrew Tate? Like, will it continue to work? Because what you said earlier, I believe you made a point about how he's less active, he does less live streams, and I've heard other people in the Hex community say that that was a beneficial thing. So perhaps if he does walk away, I mean, again, I'm playing the middleman of information,
yeah.
And I feel that's knowing this stuff helps me analyze it better. It helps me help you more.
Absolutely. And it's, you've always got just like this polarization, even within the community. When Richard was doing his outrage marketing stuff, you had people that hated it, and you had people that were like, guys, I understand what he's doing. You had people that loved it, right? Yeah. I was in the camp of like, well, I don't enjoy that kind of stuff, but I understand that making more noise and even being a polarizing figure, getting a 50% of a larger pie is better than getting 90% of a smaller pie. If half the people love you, half the people hate you, right? So there will always be people that will be, I think, just unhappy about whatever's currently happening, which is, I think, a reflection of every individual, what they're going through, and that's okay. I'm never one to be flashy like that, right? So it's not like I look at that and I'm like, oh yeah, this is what's getting me involved in the community, is all the bling and the Rolexes and stuff. I never really cared about that. I don't own a Rolex. I don't care about watches and stuff, but hey, maybe some people love that. But it's funny because it's like, I think the emotions are just a function of the price in a way too. And it's like, well, people are now complaining that Richard's not live streaming as much and maybe taking a quieter, more humble approach. And yeah, of course, I'm sure that's SEC related to a degree. You don't want to be, anything you say can be construed against you at this point. But for the people,
you don't want to be live streaming your Gucci shopping haul on YouTube. The SEC is investigating you.
Exactly. And for the people that are saying, oh, I wish Richard would come back and stream, it's like, well, do you really want him to come back and do the same thing that he's been doing for the past 3 years? Do you really want the outrage marketing again? Because you were complaining about the outrage marketing, and now you're complaining that he's being humble and taking a backseat approach. It's like, which one do you want here, right? So there's some people that just aren't going to be happy. Some people want the super old Richard Hart of him just saying smart stuff behind a camera. And I kind of think that's what he's going back to. Maybe not on YouTube so much, but maybe reverting back to the mean on Twitter and elsewhere. And there's a good part in the movie too, a good quote where it was like, what got the community here won't get us to the next step, right? And so I think, having that fiery attitude that, we're going to war against everybody and fuck all the haters and all that stuff, that might have worked when we needed to nurture the initial seed and to grow. But is that going to work now that we've got tens of thousands of people in the community, and now that we're trying to punch out and we have a whole blockchain platform, we have many more projects being built, we have a whole ecosystem going on? It doesn't tend to work. The same tactics that worked in 2020 are not going to work in 2024, I believe. And so, we need to be a little more calm, level-headed. I think the market has humbled people to a degree, and you don't see as much of, you don't see as much dunking on everybody, right? Because we can't dunk on everyone when our bags are down 99%, just like everyone else. But also, it kind of is rinsing in my mind rinsing out some of the over the top, maybe kind of unstable individuals that just liked to call people names and stuff. Because I would read that stuff on Twitter. I'd read a reasonable take on Hex, maybe that wasn't outright, calling, being negative, but maybe a skeptical take. And then you'd have a Hexagon or two in the comments saying, "You're a fucking idiot. You don't know what you're talking about." And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. We got a lot of hate, and we continue to get a lot of hate from people. So I feel like the community has been on the defensive and trying to prove themselves and trying to take any chance they could get to dunk on the haters and stuff. But now we're at this point where like not everyone's a hater, and I think we're going to get more flies with honey than vinegar at this point. We need to work through cooperations and bridge building rather than defending from attacks. Because I get it, the community was kind of forged in fire, right? We came out, nobody liked us. We stayed around. We bragged a lot because we kind of overcame all the hate. And so there was this attitude of, yeah, we're better than you. Like, join us, or go fuck yourself or whatever.
Yeah, that's not helpful. Yeah, that kind of energy, it doesn't work. Like, you brought up that term dunking on people, like just words of wisdom to anyone, regardless of where you're seated in your portfolio and your investment thesis. Like, if you do well in this world, don't dunk on people. Bring people close to you and make them aware of what you're aware of. Share your knowledge. Like, there's no need to gloat. There's no need to show off, and definitely don't flex, because that it toxifies your soul and it makes you a bad person to your community, like in the long run. Maybe at first it's kind of cool to do, pop some champagne, but when you're in the bear market, you're the one that looks kind of like an idiot, right? Because you were promoting something for what it wasn't even about. Like, actually the only way to make money in this market is by you on an individual putting money in the market and then eventually taking it out at a high price, right? So it always comes back to your moves. And I know that there's a community and there's founders and there's dev team and all of these other machinations of it. But slam dunk on people, ultimately you could look at it for the whole and be aware of where you stand on the individual.
But yeah, and it goes both ways too, right? To other people looking at the Hex community, because in the early days there was a lot of baseless claims, like straight up lies, and people that just didn't want to see Hex begin for whatever reason, right? Like they just wanted it to fail from the get-go. So there was a lot of that attitude of antagonism, right? Whereas hopefully in the bear market we can move towards this cooperation mindset. And I don't see as much. Obviously there's nothing to brag about when we're all down bad, right? But it's like I think that's kind of where the community should go next, and hopefully that's where it is going. I see a lot more level-headedness on the content creator side. I see a lot less animosity. And at this point, we've got haters that will still try to say that Hex is dead and stuff like that. But even the haters are getting a little less, evil and hateful. You know what I mean? They're more. I would hope that they're turning into more skeptics than just outright haters, right? Because if you look at what some of these guys have said in the past about us, like, blatant insults to the community, insults to Richard Hart as a person and stuff like that, those aren't related to, the product at all. It's like, and so that's, I'm seeing less of that, I guess, which is good, because we're just all in the same boat now of, this sucks. When are we going to recover? Come on, bull market, please. Let's go. So,
well, I mean, in my position, what I have to deal with is coming from two angles. It's one, the people that are just finding out that I'm covering this project, who never cared about it, who are already in my community for other reasons. And they're coming at me. Obviously there's levels to this, but I've had some hate from people who are like, why do you care about this shit coin? That type of energy.
A lot of that.
And then on the other side, I have the people that are like, they want me to cover Hex every single day now. They found out of like how accurate the calls are. And like, I'm just trying to play this, like, this mode of like, hey guys, like, we're in a moment right now where if you believe in something, it's accumulation. Like, if you believe in something and the charts are down this bad, it's accumulation. So we need to get now deeper into where do you stand with your cash flow? What business do you have? Like, what are you doing with your finances? How could we allocate some of these profits that you're getting from either your business or your job, this rollover money, if you will, and we could DCA effectively over this period of time? Like, I think that's more fun to talk about. Like, I think instead of people just labeling people as like either maxis or, you know, why are you wasting your time on the shit coin? It's like, well, first of all, I don't visualize that I'm wasting any time on anything. I am a creator, and people have believe what I'm sharing has a lot of value. And I believe that these communities have a lot of value. Just because I'm not devote to one particular project doesn't mean that I can't be integrated and collaborate. Like, my whole mission with doing this social media thing is to do the opposite of what social media is doing to the world, which is divide and conquer. I want to actually use this platform that I have to bring people together for unity consciousness, like to get us to be, you know, more in the collaborative essence and less in the sword fight that is just perpetuating because of drama and bread and circus. So I think that we all have that opportunity, whether you have a following of one person or 100 people or 100,000. You know, it's just what happens is as you grow, it amplifies. So my words affect more people with more people that I'm reaching, right? That's essentially all it is. But the truth and integrity and like your mission statement, that must be unwavering. And I think perhaps it's just in our hands, me and you and people that resonate with us, to continue to find people that have that same unwavering mission statement of collaboration. And if we could band together, that will create the ripple effect, and that will bring, you know, it'll overshadow any of the bullshit and the negativity and the nonsense and the tribalism.
Yeah, very well said. Social media is it's a double-edged sword, right? It's just like any tool, it can be used for good or evil, or, you know, good and bad. It's divisive in the sense that it does create this me versus you. It creates separation, right? And like, I want my followers, and some people think that the way for them to get their attention is to sacrifice their connection for significance, right? And that's, you know, the Andrew Tate playbook and the Donald Trump playbook. And this reminds me of what I was going to say earlier about some of those guys, right? And Richard Hart might have realized this too, to a degree, is you can only play that playbook for so long before the karma, you know, kind of catches up to you in the universe. And, you know, Tate went to jail. Trump, you know, look at him. It's not looking so good. And it's not to say that that's a totally different story, right? Every one of these cases is a very unique story. But look at Conor McGregor, right? You can brag all day long, but one day you're going to get knocked out by some other guy.
Yeah, one day your leg's going to snap in half.
Yeah, and then it's all about the next guy, right? So to play these games of like the Roman circus or the gladiator of like who's the hot, you know, who's the big hot shot of this year or this month.
Yeah.
I think Richard hopefully is this is his going out with a bang type of deal. Like the SEC lawsuit, hope he wins, hope he settles or whatever. It might take a year and a half, 2 years. But after this, I think, you know, you don't want to go back to that same old outrage marketing style. You know, that might work for a period of time, but it's got a lifespan. So,
yeah,
yeah,
I think maybe people could take a look at Ty Lopez. I think he's a great example of somebody that perpetuated success throughout his downfall. Like, he's doing super fucking well. And we all know him. Like, if you used YouTube at the time that he was paying for the most insane ad budget of all time, you know, I mean, he's just a fascinating dude because he's actually smart as shit. So you can talk shit about him all day. You can say that he's annoying and that all he cared about was Lambos. But like, if you actually listen to him speak, you know that he knows his shit. Like, this is a big reason that I decide to do live streams and I go for 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours, because people need to know that I'm not scripted, first and foremost, that I could communicate with my community without needing all of this time to think. And I could go for 3 hours straight with all of that going on and answer some of the most vast, you know, subject matter questions, everything from health and wellness to things regarding, you know, advanced financial, you know, theories and what's going on in the economy. So you'll know real ones based off of how can they talk without the script. And a lot of YouTube is just chopped up kind of takes of people strung together thoughts, and you don't really know who's authentic or not. But I'm giving you the recipe right now for anyone who's listening. You'll know people are real by how their interviews go, how their live streams go, like how this free format kind of stuff is put together. Then you'll know, like, are they sharp? You know, when I listen to Elon Musk, I got to admit, I don't feel he's that sharp. I feel he's very slow in his responses. Usually he's not super calculated. Most of his answers seem scripted. A lot of his behavior when he responds almost feels like he's going back into a bank of a response that he pre-thought, and then now he's regurgitating that. But when I listen to somebody like Andrew Tate, I actually do feel like he is very sharp, very like instant, like it's like it just channels information instantaneously. Now, they're both equally shills. They both equally serve their purpose for the grand world order. But I sense a different quality in their behavior when they communicate. One of them I feel is actually raw and genuine, and the other one I feel is just determining on what he needs to do as his piece on the chessboard of reality. And that's kind of different. And I actually don't support anything that Andrew Tate's about, really. Like, I'm not a supporter of his. I've spoken directly to my community about what he is. I've called him daddy technology. He just serves as the missing father.
Yeah.
And that really hurts people, but that's actually all that's going on here. Like, if you study psychoanalysis and you understand trauma of the past and what most men go through,
Well, to be
single
honest,
mothers,
that was what Richard almost was to some people as well, I feel.
that's what
Richard
I've
Hart
also
was
told
that figure.
people. Yeah, exactly. And that's what a lot of these, and when you have a great mind like Jordan Peterson step down and focus on other endeavors, then naturally other people are going to take those reins. And that's where you get a person like Tate. And I even heard Sam Harris say something that was very wise recently. He said that I don't know if I want this person to be the poster child of a generation of a whole gender because of where his morals and ethics are based in. They're very material and they're lacking in spirituality. And although he's sharp and he has good points, and this, again, this allows people to see really where I'm coming from, because I could respect a man for one skill and also be upright and, like, you know, direct about how I feel about him holistically. And I've said this in my last video about Richard Hart too. I said, I don't know him. I have no idea what he actually stands for. I've never shook hands with him. So it's not my place to determine the whole character of his genuine, I don't know his integrity. I just don't. And a lot of people are out here on Twitter acting like they know the guy, or like they've met him or something.
It's funny.
And people spend.
I've actually met him, right? And I don't think a lot of people have actually met the guy. But just to speak about that for a second, like I've chatted with him, Telegram or whatever, for years. Ever since even before Hex was invented. So maybe 3.5 years now. And I feel like I know him, but obviously we're not best friends or anything. But I feel like he's this weird kind of enigma of a character where he's highly intelligent. I mean, IQ wise, highly intelligent. And then he's got this almost like psychedelic aspect, even though he doesn't do drugs or anything, but this ability to show different sides of his own persona and them all being true, right? Like, so he's got the spirituality within him. He wrote a book, and there's a whole chapter in the book about spirit, And so, like, people don't realize that this is a guy that, like, he can choose to be and operate many different ways in the world. And part of me thinks that, like, the whole outrage thing, that's just another side of what was also true about him. He also does enjoy the luxury, the materialism. He enjoys the hedonism to a degree, but he can tap into this like spiritual side as well. And I do think that he's genuine about wanting to change the world through blockchain tech and what that can do from people in terms of freedom of speech and movement. Fixing the money is fixing the world. And that's something that he's got this, he's attached to his sense of higher purpose as well, but he can go up and down in those levels to kind of a base consciousness and a higher crown level. So it's weird that he can move on the spectrum so fluidly, I feel.
Well, that's actually what I was going to comment on about him directly, is like, out of what I've seen of him, he's insanely sharp in his interviews. It's like instantaneous answer that's unique, and there's no space of thinking. And that to me is a sign of a genuine response and a genuine reaction. And clearly a very intellectual, intelligent human being, and obviously very good at marketing. So no matter where you look at it, like there's something behind these individuals. And I hope that whenever we're following along, we just do what I call believe in yourself and resonate with everything else. So when you start to believe in outside of you, this is where it starts to become cult and pretty problematic, and where you start to
Exactly.
fail along with it. But if you just take the wisdom of the Tates and the wisdom of the Richard Harts and the wisdom, I mean, Christine Lagarde was spitting wisdom back in the day when she was teaching people about numerology during an Euro Central Bank conference. She was telling people straight up how to do numerology on camera and talking about the 7 good years and the 7 bad years. And people, like, they talk so negatively about the New World Order, but they disregard that the New World Order is always telling you the truth directly to your face. So I've had people that are like, oh, the Shemitah is just like bullshit. Like, I'm like, okay, well, first of all, we have historic data that shows us that every single market bull run and crash is on a Shemitah year. That's all you need. You also see that the wars, change of power, I mean, everything, change of the world curve, you name it. Like, it's all happening on these 7-year cycles. But then you have the leader of the entire Euro Central Bank come out on camera publicly and start talking about this concept. And when she said it, it all came to fruition over the next 7 years. And then at that 8th year point, we had a huge fucking crash. So they're not just like hiding in the shadows. They're giving it to the world, but the world can't see it because they lack consciousness. They're too busy, like, scrolling on TikTok.
It's true. And a lot of these World Economic Forum types, I do believe that there are white hats and black hats and gray hats within there too. I mean, there's people that are navigating the future of the world, and they're trying to, instill their programs into reality. But some of them are at various levels of higher and lower consciousness. I mean, even like Tristan Tate, right? Wasn't he at the World Economic Forum? So, if you,
I'm sure
if you,
Sadhguru was at
kinda,
the World Economic Forum. That guy's a fucking like global spiritual leader.
yeah.
Why is
Yeah,
he why is he in Switzerland at this? Like, why?
it's very true, right? So people just, it's not
I
as
mean,
easy.
isn't spiritualism anti-capital? Like, isn't that why you denounce all of your worldly possessions and become a fucking monk and go stay at an ashram? But
Nah,
yet
bro.
this man is at the World Economic. But you see, like, that's how the people
Yeah.
could see through how corrupt it is.
Yeah. But it's also, I think conspiracies help certain people simplify the world. I mean, certain conspiracies, right? But by just saying everyone that went to the World Economic Forum is evil or bad, or like,
Sure,
it's very
absolutely.
complex. It's very, there's competing agendas. It's hard to parse through all the noise and find the signal. And then you'll find some people where just everything is a conspiracy. Like fires
Correct.
in Maui, good chance that's the actual, there's something there that's not right. But then you look at like the girl on the plane that was just yelling at somebody. People are like, what did she see, bro? Did she see the reptilians? And it's like, maybe she was just on too much Ambien or something. Like, like there's certain things that you need to think for yourself and not just buy in to everything as a conspiracy, right? Because you're going to have kind of a paranoid life at that point.
Correct. I think
But
the big piece of wisdom and then we'll wrap up the thought, is whenever these cultural moments happen, just check in with yourself and ask yourself, does it actually have real world utility for me? Like,
yeah,
does what this lady in the airplane doing have anything to fucking do with my reality tunnel? And if you can't
yeah.
actually be honest with yourself there, then that's called delusion. And if you do believe that this serves you and that's how you stand, well, then good luck. Good luck in your future. I'll leave it at that. No judgment.
Yeah. Yeah, well, very, very well said. I want to tangent off that some certain things in terms of cycles, right? You mentioned the Shemitah cycle. That was 2021. That's a Jubilee year. Sometimes some people call it a Jubilee, a debt forgiveness
Well,
cycle.
we're in the Jubilee now,
Okay.
in this year.
Okay.
Yeah. So the way it works, I'll just quickly explain it, and then you could follow up with the question. We have a Shemitah year every 7 years that starts on the Rosh Hashanah of the 7th year, and then it ends on the Rosh Hashanah of the following year, which means that the last one started in September 2021 and it ended in September 2022. Now, if anyone goes into the major indice charts and looks at September into October of 2022, you will see for the NASDAQ, Dow Jones, and S&P 500 and Russell 2000 that all of your lows in that microcycle happened on that time. Now,
Wow.
the all-time high also happened during Shemitah year. So that's another important thing. It's like they bring us to a peak and then send us into, and then right after Rosh Hashanah, we recovered, and we've been recovering still to this conversation. And we're all the way in August. And that happened back in fucking September 2022, almost a year ago, right? So the next thing to say is that 7 cycles of 7 is 49 years. And on the 50th year, you have what's called biblical jubilee. This is not Waters Above's opinion. This is not numerology or human design or star talk. This is biblical. Like we're talking about, this is the number coding system that is from Torah. So this is really, really fascinating that we might very well be in the Jubilee year. It's just the problem is no one can determine with 100% certainty when the Jubilee is. I've just done my research through everything that I've scanned through to tell me that 50 years ago from this moment was clearly Jubilee because we had the Nixon shock, which you know what that was, basically eliminating the convertibility of gold from the US dollar. And not only that, the ending of the Bretton Woods system, which then went into this moment, which was a cultural moment of hyperinflation. And then we saw the 1973 to 1975 recession. That whole time frame, I believe, is almost a perfect mimic of what we're experiencing now. And this Nixon moment could very well be the exact repeat of what happens with Biden. And I'm not going to go into any conspiracy here. I'll leave it at that. But I just want to let people know that if you're uncertain of what the Jubilee is, you just want to look at these 50-year patterns and look at these moments where super cycles are pretty obvious that we enter depression states and we recover out of them accordingly. So that gives enough foundation to kind of give your listeners a basic understanding of what the Shemitah and Jubilee are.
Cool. Thanks. And it's ironic because I was just going to ask about Rosh Hashanah as well. I believe that's September 17th. Is that right?
Yeah, it's almost a month away from today. It's a 3-day cycle. It starts on sundown, ends on sundown, the following day of the middle day. So with Judaism and the Hebrew calendar, they're utilizing the moon cycle. This is why Rosh Hashanah is changing every single year. It's never on the same dates because it's always on the new moon.
So that sounds like it's going to be a good day for a reset. You know, and people are going to laugh at me for getting woo-woo with the moon cycles and stuff. Guys, humor me for a second, right? Because look what happened on the last one, right? You had the SEC news on the full moon, and usually those are volatility to the downside. I just want to ask you this. So you've got the next full moon, and it's a blue moon, right? Coming up on August 30th, followed by the new moon. And you could simply remember it as, for stonks, guys, good full moon, good, new moon. No, full moon, bad, new moon, good. Anyway, yeah. Blue moon, August 30th. New moon, Rosh Hashanah, September 17th. 3 days.
Yeah.
3 days long. Do you see that significantly playing into the charts at this point of exhaustion in the markets, or is it just going to like kind of flatline, or what do you see happening?
That's a great question. So I have on my Patreon account over the last 2 weeks, I released 2 weeks ago a blue moon crypto video that looked at every single blue moon in the existence of Bitcoin and showing how it showed up like in the charts, what was going on with the structure and trend. And also we saw some pretty nasty flash crashes. But then just last week, I released 3 days ago, actually, the newest podcast over on my Patreon where I went through every single blue moon going back to the .com bubble. So you asked me at the right time because I'm fresh with this data. I did every Dow Jones and NASDAQ blue moon going back to 1999.
Damn.
And there's absolutely patterns. And although it's not the most significant data, it does seem to be a repeating pattern. And I see that the next FOMC meeting is situated perfectly in all of this as well. So you brought up Rosh Hashanah, you brought up the blue moon, but then there's also a couple days after Rosh Hashanah, the next FOMC. So that makes this moment between pretty much this conversation we're having right now and the middle end of September to be one of the most significant potential pivot points for what is obviously an overbought stock market. The stock market should not be this high right now. It makes no fucking sense that Apple was at an all-time high recently. This is silly, okay? So this market needs come back to reality. And it's weird how actually Bitcoin this time around didn't get as much bullish energy and follow that wave as it usually would. For instance, the Dow Jones doing so well, we should see that mimic in Bitcoin. And Bitcoin actually is doing pretty good. It's up 100% off of the lows back in November of 2022. But the point here is that you ask a question about blue moons, and there's one pattern we're seeing on the stocks, which is that we tend to have a higher low from the first full moon of the month. So if people are not aware, a blue moon is 2 full moons in the same month, meaning that we've already had our first full moon. We can go back to the Dow chart or the NASDAQ chart, and we could assume on historical data that we should actually have a higher low. We should finish off the month higher. Now, what we see many times is that we'll rise slightly through into the beginning of September in historical data, and then we have big corrections. So if this is going to keep going, it could actually go until a little bit past the blue moon into potentially the next new moon, which is what you just explained before, is what happens on these microcycles. And then I believe it's lights out. And we also have historic data to show us this, because we have the performance of the stock market month by month going back to 1950, broken up by month. So the month of August in a pre-election year actually finishes in the green. And during a pre-election year in September, we finish unanimously red. Now, that goes for the past 10 years data, past 20 years, and since 1950. And on pre-election years. So we can almost guarantee that wherever the fuck we close in August, we're going to be lower in September. And the fact that we have this next FOMC meeting moving into Q4, I have a feeling that's it. That's lights out. And that's why I'm actually probably going to short the stock market soon. But I'm not really too, I need to think a little bit about how I present this to the world before I share that. You're kind of getting that for the first time, but I do plan to put in puts on the market.
And Michael Burry would agree. But that guy, he's not a prophet either. He's been wrong, right? But he just bought what, $1.6 billion worth of puts. Basically, it sounds like
Well, he's interesting because I believe that he's so popular now that the New World Order knows that if he's going to share this information, it's like, are they going to do what they did to him last time, where it's not that he was wrong, it's that he was wrong for a while, and it was long enough to be exhausting until the day he was right. And then when he was right, he was standing alone.
Good point. Yeah, I mean, and so we've got this new moon, right, which is generally a bullish thing on September 17th?
16th.
Right? 16th? Okay. But
then it's just Rosh Hashanah. Yep.
Yeah. But then you've got the FOMC meeting on September 19th and 20th, which they're likely to raise rates for the last time, punching that final nail in the coffin, so to speak, on the old-fashioned stonk market. Do you think crypto has already been such a bloodbath that, I'm not saying September is going to be a good month, but man, I don't want to, my bias is I don't want another 50% dip, man. Like, in crypto, that would be tough, right? So if you think that's coming, if you still think like the volatility in crypto is going to, explode to the downside in September, let the people know, I guess, now.
Yeah, well, I do. But it depends on what we're talking about here. If we're talking about Hex, that might be the opportunity for it to head into I'll break it down one step at a time. With eHex, I see 003 as low as 0021. So that would be where I do think into October, that's a huge possibility. If Bitcoin wants to break down into 25K or a little bit lower, that could start being some really dramatic sell-offs for the altcoin market. I believe that Bitcoin and ETH will probably be in the healthiest position. Perhaps even XRP, because it's gotten a little clarity recently, just a little bit, you know what I'm saying? And it's already on a fucking 100-year consolidation sideways. So it's like, how much more could it take? But with Hex then perpetually falling with no structure, and that means it needs to find a bottom. So that's a good thing. Like, if we're going to get a bottom, it should be coming much sooner than later. And that, again, I know that doesn't sound really that happy for everyone, but there's just no structure with what we're dealing with right now as we have this conversation, and that will absolutely affect pHex. And that's where I could see pHex heading down to 0042, 0043, which I think would be a buying opportunity. So I do think there's much more blood in the streets, but it just depends on what we're talking about. Since you're mostly in Hex, I answered that question for you guys. For the people that are generally in crypto, Bitcoin and ETH, I do not think will go lower than they went recently, back in the end of 2022. So 15K should be the bottom for Bitcoin. And seeing ETH below 1,000 would probably have to be an isolated event to the shitcoin market. Which I want to happen too. Like, I would love for the ERC20 coins to be washed out. I think that's part of the grand vision of the elite, actually, because there's still the next big chess move, which is tokenization of the stock market.
Yep.
Which I'm actually going to be making. My next decode that I'm releasing is called Yellow Bricks Road, and it's going to be dedicated to BRICS conference that's happening in a week. And I'm going to be doing all of the like breakdown on what I see to come from that. But I think what's happening with X Corp and what's happening with that transition, which could very well be the Western world's WeChat, we might start to see some crazy shit go down in the tech sector and fintech, where they start creating their own stable coins and they start creating their own, and this is what Christine Lagarde said she wanted to prevent happening to the euro. That's what she revealed when she brought up that in October this year, they're going to be discussing their decision on a digital euro. And she specifically said for that reason, because she wants to prevent something like Amazon creating their own fucking crypto, right? So I think that if there's going to be a company that's big enough with infrastructure to pull something like this off, it will be Elon, it will be X Corp. And that will be the perfect... yes, I know. But I'm not entirely sure if PayPal is not fully already in with the banks. So if anything, what they're doing is that's the retail level or business level to kind of get them ready for this. But I don't think that's going to be a competitor to the US dollar by any means. It is just the US dollar. I mean, I don't really think it's going to be as threatening as something perhaps like this theory on what I just brought up before, basically X Corp creating their own system. And it's a big play, because we could all see something like this coming. Elon himself has admitted it, that if they were to do something like this, it would be like what, like half the world's GDP could be converted into this system.
Well, so you're not talking about a stable coin now. This is like a gold backed type of deal, or
I don't know what it would be backed. I don't know what it would be backed by, but that's where this BRICS decode comes into play, because we all know about the theory of BRICS coming out with something that is SDR-like, that could be pegged to gold. It could be pegged to other precious metals like palladium or whatever, but that's still theory, but we know for a fact that they want a solution to the US dollar being the world reserve. They want something else. They're out of it, right? And when you look at the list of the applicants as of just 2023 to want to join BRICS, it will make your fucking jaw drop how many countries want to move forward with whatever they decide. So, I mean, even Mexico being on the list blew my mind.
Wow.
Because Mexico shares land borders with America. So what do you think that does to trade routes, Like, this could really move into a global world conflict just with BRICS deciding to make a decision as going forth with their own SDR-like CBDC that's backed by gold.
Yeah, they're going to be a contender for sure. I mean, the life cycle of any currency isn't much longer than 50 years on average, but 250 years in the lucky case of the US dollar. So its time is running out, and it's not like they die with a bang, right? These things slowly fizzle out, and they die to competition over time. So if BRICS does give the US dollar a run for their money, I could see why so many countries would want to join, because the USA pissed a lot of people off with their, I don't know if you've read Confessions of an Economic Hitman, but they would just kind of enforce by military might and just get, basically enslave different countries with debt to the US dollar for a long time. And that worked until it didn't. right? And now that,
and if you look at that list of countries that have been dealt that way, they're all applying to be on BRICS.
of course, yeah,
Yep. It's the
of
same
course.
thing when you look at the wars that are just coming out of nowhere, whatever bullshit the US news makes up. It's actually nations that don't want to be on the Federal Reserve System. And that's something no one wants to talk about. You know, there's a very big reason why we're going to the war with the quote unquote Middle East. And you look at into the financial, you know, infrastructure, and you start to see why. You know, you don't want to give into the Fed. Well, then you're going to see military boots stomping on your throat. And that's just the way it is. Even if you have no defense system in place, like, this is fucking ruthless. They were going into, as you know, if you brought up that piece of information, you know, CIA and these operatives and these compartmentalized programs are going into countries with no military and just invading them. That's fucking brutal, dude. That's like seriously fucking brutal. And this is all because of the Federal Reserve System. That's the only reason it's happening. Like, at the end of the day.
Gangster shit, man. It's like
straight up. It's like mob life.
Yep. It's and that's what it has been, always has been, right? It's like the meme, right?
So brother, like, I think that kind of gets you to where I stand on my theory that I think that actually this could be short-term bullish for Bitcoin. If this moment was to come, because it would make people go, okay, well, the fucking government is always dropping the ball. So I know I have this quote unquote exit to put my money in for, you know, this isn't my opinion. This is what the people think. And I think we actually saw this live when we had the Russia-Ukraine conflict. We actually saw this narrative of Bitcoin and blockchain or cryptocurrency being somewhat of a good thing. If you're going to have your lifeline cut off from you, it's an alternative currency in that way. Now, I'm not saying that that's truth. I'm saying that that's the narrative they came out with, and that's what the belief is. And if that's what people believe, then that's all that matters. Do you think if we're going to have an economic crisis, they're going to go into fucking XRP? No.
Like, you're going to the household name. Yeah, first.
They're going to go into Bitcoin because that's what governments are already sitting in. So this is going to be an interesting play. I'm not pro Bitcoin, by the way. I'm not a Bitcoin maxi. I'm just looking at the facts and I'm being open-minded to what's been going on here. And I think that this will still bring a correction for Bitcoin. I just don't think it'll be as dramatic as it would be for a lot of these altcoins. And with the nonsense in the NFT game and everything in the shitcoin memery market, like, that stuff needs to be drained. And as it drains away, the communities that actually have, you know, solid community and they care about what they're invested in, they're building together, they'll be fine, but they'll take a big hit for sure. Everyone's going to, actually, the last thing I'll say, and this is a fun way to have people picture where I stand on this, is it's going to be a Royal Rumble. Like, everyone gets thrown out of the cage. Everyone leaves with bruises. It's just, you know who will leave with the least bruises? Goldman fucking Sachs. Like, JP fucking Morgan. That's who leaves with the least bruise. They still get some bruises, but they never fucking lose. Like, American Express will not lose. Bank of America will not lose. They will allow everyone else to fucking die except for themselves. And that's just the way this works. And none of those things I just said are a cryptocurrency.
Yeah. And these banks also own a lot of Bitcoin already. So, you know, the only reason that you see them shilling it and talking positively, you see Larry Fink out of BlackRock saying, well, we believe Bitcoin is, you know, the future now. It's like, well, you weren't saying that 3 years ago. And now it's because you bought a lot. That's because you bought the fucking dip. And well, you were telling everybody else to sell it. Not in so many words, but I think after
it's the same thing with Chase, right? With Jamie Dimon.
Same thing with Chase. Yeah, they feel like they have control of Bitcoin, but I mean, in a sense, they have control of a lot of the coins, right? They're buying into MicroStrategy. They're, you know, the DOJ has seized 300,000 Bitcoin already, so they've got a big chunk of change there. The USA might own 5 to 10% of all the Bitcoin between all the corporations and stuff. So, now is that control? Not really, but they feel comfortable enough to, you know, they need exit liquidity. All right, so for this next cycle, we're going to see that. Too big to fail, man. The banks always come out on top. I want to just pivot because I think my followers would want me to ask you this too. We talked about Hex, right? But PulseChain is a big one as well. And if I had to ask you about the prices on PulseChain, I'm not even sure if you've taken a look at the chart. I can pull it up, but you know, is that just the same as pHex with not a lot of chart history to go off of, it's hard to call a bottom or a near-term play.
I believe I've been actually covering that in some of my videos already. But I need to pull up the exact chart. Perhaps you could send it to me really quickly in the chat, and then I can load it on up, and then I could see kind of where you're at with things.
Sure thing.
Because this is a third chart to analyze, right?
Yeah. Well, there's PulseX and then there's PLS. So
Right.
yeah, I think the big three right now are Hex, eHex, and PLS. PulseX will probably follow as a ratio of PLS in my opinion because of the liquidity. But yeah, let me try to find that PLS.
And then you could
chart.
send me the I think on email, because I don't know if the chat will work on this. We're not streaming. But yeah, I mean, my take on this has been similar since I talked with Randy Hilarski, where I told him that, whatever next big move happens for eHex will be the next big move for the others. And now I just don't think it'll be as dramatic maybe for the others if the move on eHex is an exodus out of that into one of these other projects. Now, I just can't determine that. Maybe you guys can. You could look into the order blocks and you could start to see like what the fuck's going on. I don't care to know this information, but just from the basic perspective of if we do get a correction in eHex because there's some sort of development with Richard Hart and the SEC, then you best believe it will show up in this Pulse chart or the pHex chart. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, we do see a lot of money.
Look it up.
I just emailed you the chart, but yeah, we do see a lot of money flowing around in between all the assets in the ecosystem, right? People are choosing their, how much of a stake in each one they want to have, and they're also extending out to different protocols, Hedron, Fiat, whatever it might be, pHiot. There's all these other different protocols being built, so it's like people are building their allocations within an entire ecosystem now.
Right.
Yeah, here, let me pull this up.
Yeah, so you're asking me to just do some technicals on this really quickly? Is that?
I mean, it looks almost identical to pHex, right? So
correct. Well, yeah. I mean, the one thing I will say here that I like, again, I'll just let people know that I'm on a log scale right now, logarithmic chart where this setting is turned on, and then on my fib that I just pulled, this setting is turned on, fibs levels based on the log scale. And what I did is I pulled a bearish fib, which is a thing that not too many people show. It's just in reverse. And the reason I picked it from this level was because that's a very critical breaking point support. And what I did is showing me this 1618 on the bottom. So the golden ratio now shows up on the bottom instead of the top by doing it in reverse like this. So this is actually really not so good from a technical perspective to see us come back into this level right here and get rejected and then come back with a pretty nasty pullback, because if not even just considering the wick, like if I was to just pull from that level down, it was a 44% correction. This is not strength. This is showing me weakness. So you can see right here from this bigger correction, we were attempting an uptrend, slight reversal, higher lows, but then right here there was this flash, obviously because of what happened, I guess, with the SEC. Now coming back up to this level and getting a rejection shows that this has flipped, right, from a prior support into a resistance. But the reason why that's not fair to say is because we have such limited data. I'm working with a very short amount of chart history, as you're well aware. But yeah, that's not good. That's a sign of weakness. Now we have double tapped on this level right here. This I can't even read it out because it's too many numbers. But what I like is the fact that we tapped on the 1618. To me, that's about as deep as we tend to go. And I hope that's the case for this asset, because really that was like the launch point. Wherever it kind of started charting was pretty much right there. So that is the lowest close, even though, that's not even fair. Okay, so I'll be honest. I'll mark this off right here to give you guys an idea of where this will get bad. This level, this 0, 0, 0, 4 zeros, 4, 4. That's easy to remember. If we start to close 12-hour candles below that, get ready. This can get really rough. Now, if we can get back above this level right here, the 786, which is the golden pocket in reverse, that would actually be a positive sign. So let me take this off and pull this in the opposite direction for you. And I'm going to change the way I'm doing this analysis from log to linear. I'm just going to adjust this. Okay, great. Now you're going to see the 236. So assuming that this is our local bottom and we do recover from here, it's nice to get back above this level. I just gave you guys a cheat code before with the bearish fib. You just think as the 786. I don't want to get too complicated. But if you can get back above this right here, this little peak into July 14th, that will show me some strength, and that'll say that, okay, this could very well be the bottom. So we need conditions. Condition number one is get over this right here. And then we could feel confident that this is bottom. Now, we will know that if we start closing 12-hour candles below this level that I shared with you earlier, that means that we're more likely heading lower. That just gives you two basic conditions to consider for upside or downside. So it's a horizontal level to play in. And my opinion would be, it would be healthier for us to fill out this level between where we're at now and the 236, because if we were to pump above it, you would want some support on the downside. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yes, it does.
Okay.
I mean, I'm hoping for a short, like, I guess what I'm reading from all this is I'm just hoping that we get to these catastrophic bottoms. Obviously, I don't want us to break below 4 zeros and a 4-4. But if
yeah, because then you just have more price discovery to the downside. Like you have no data below these levels. That's why I was saying like that's really rough, because you'll really see who the real ones are when you start to continue price discovery to the downside. And there's some great real life examples of this. If people want to know what the hell I'm talking about, go to the Casper chart. I mean, fuck.
Is that crypto? What is that?
Yeah, it's a cryptocurrency.
Okay.
I think it's CSPR is the ticker symbol. I'll try to maybe load it up if you want me to share this idea here. Let me see if I could quickly transition this.
Yeah, go ahead if you want to pull that up.
Yeah, I'll try to see so I could give you guys an example of like what price discovery to the downside looks like.
I see Casper.
It's not fun.
Well, I see Casper on its own blockchain. Does it have its own blockchain?
It's CSPR.
Yeah. And then you've got it wrapped on BNB, but you've got it's on.
Do you see my trading view now?
Yep. So that's on the.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So here's the thing, family. When you look at what is it? The pulse. What was the chart we were looking at a moment ago? Wrapped pulse on die trading pair.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. That what we're at right now, as we're speaking, is kind of like where this Casper chart was, like here in this mode. Okay. Right here. Now, if we broke down more, we would just continue more price discovery to the downside, and then it would most likely mimic this chart exactly. It would start to treat this prior support right here, pull a horizontal level. Oh, sorry. Let me make that cleaner for everyone. I think if I just do a straight line and make it white and I remove all this other noise, you see exactly what the hell I'm talking about. So look at that. Imagine we're right here with wrapped pulse. If we broke below, we're probably going to flip this fucking support as a really long-term resistance. And then you'll just be choppy until somebody steps in with some big money, or the people pile in with small amounts of money and high volume, right? It's either or. But this is not looking so great, because let's just say this was to happen in September, next month, October. Yeah, you could literally be looking at another 500, 600 days of sideways. And if any negative developments happen regarding Richard Hart tied to the SEC, well, then it'll promise you probably even more downside. But this thing just launched and it's been perpetually down since. And now it's slightly in its recovery, but still it's not able to flip that prior support. It's just, yeah. I hope this is helpful to give people an idea of like what the shittiest outcome could be, you know, like
right.
if you want the worst news first, that's it. But I really think what I shared before is the thing to consider the most, which is that we have to remind ourselves that Ripple had this moment where it got the SEC coming after it, and then 115 days later, it did a tax.
Yeah.
So if the buyers can really step in, like if the positivity can step in any capacity, and there's belief that shows up in that way, like it's not impossible for recovery. I mean, but the money needs to come from somewhere, right?
Yeah. Well, the things I do see are people building products of actual value. I see a ton of
Oh
meme
my
coins
God.
that I agree need to need to get washed out, just like all the, all the Pepes and every single offshoot of Pulse, Doge, Elon, whatever.
Right.
Um, not to pick on anything individually, but there will be a tidal wave of really, really generic meme coins that will probably get washed out. I see more content creators and builders than ever before on the Pulse chain. So what I'm optimistic for, and again, I could be optimistic to a fault, right? But I feel like for me personally, there's no better way to operate in the world than realistic optimism, regardless of how bad things are, right? Because as a long-term holder, I do believe things will come back. Matter of if not when, right? Or it's a matter of when, not if, rather. So
Right.
what I'm gathering is that I'm hoping for us to be out of the darkest of times sometime, after that September, maybe October range, when we have
Right.
that final Fed meeting, that final Rosh Hashanah, new moon, nail in the coffin, perhaps, and then hopefully we can get some recovery after that.
Yeah, it's probably all going to go down before November. Like I would say that any big next move to the downside, it's more than likely to be fulfilled by moving into Christmas. And like, I don't mean,
Would you mind repeating that? I think we lost your voice for a second.
yeah. So essentially, I was just sharing that I do believe that the doom and gloom should be out of the way by November.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yep. Let's hope for that, right?
I mean, that's historically what we see in the patterns. Like we should have actually October, November, December tends to be a bullish time frame, even in the pre-election years. But given the state of the stock market being so overvalued right now, I think correction is just in its process of starting now. Like as we make it through the rest of this month, we go through the next FOMC, we bring I mean, then my key date, and again, maybe woo for some of your people, but it's solar eclipse in October 14th solar eclipse, which this is undeniable now, and I believe that I've done enough to prove how powerful these solar eclipses are in my work over the past 2 years. I mean, all the big isolated crypto events were happening on these solar eclipses, and we have one in this upcoming October. But here's another chart to share, and then I need to I have about 5 more minutes. I could be with you, and I got to run. But
That's okay.
this is probably one of the worst examples of a chart that I've ever seen. This is Songbird.
Okay.
If people want to know what shit looks like, this is it. This is 650 days, losing 99.95% of its value, and its price discovery to the downside. You see this moment right here, though. This is what could have seriously happened to Pulse, any of these pairs, right here. It's a really sharp, nasty, because there's nothing beneath you. So there's no technical players that are here to save you. The retail is already weak hands all the time whenever these big moments happen. I mean, that's obvious. So yeah, being invested in a project during one of those slides is really not the most fun, because that's where you're going to see all the negativity come out on the socials. That's where it's going to really get bad. And you hope that bigger players step in there. Whales, if they don't want to show up, then yeah, it could continue to the downside. And I believe that the timing is probably similar too. Let me just show you the amount of days between launch date and this slide. It's about 192 days. So if we were to go over to the chart that you shared with me earlier from the day of launch over 192 days, that brings you to sometime in November of this year. So, I mean, shit, like it's pretty well timed that this thing could have a little flash in October. And now that's actually a positive thing for you guys, because although it seems like shitty that it's going down, I mean, if you recover and if there's still conviction in the community moving forward, then fuck, what a buying opportunity that would be.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. That would be the mother of all dips, the bottom
Right.
signal. And like let's say mid-October, right? Yeah, from a technical perspective, I think, yeah, thanks for showing these levels. It's important to hold above that. From a fundamental perspective, I believe it's going to be up to the community on this one, right? It's going to be up to the conviction of everybody. We all know Waters is a technical analyst with very good takes on Fibonacci, moon cycles, and cycles in general. A lot of people just draw random schizo lines on a chart. I kind of like your methodology a bit better. When it comes to TA, I trash talk TA sometimes because you should see some of the guys out here doing it. It's just, yeah, I can draw triangles and random stuff all day long, but there's a method to your madness, which I really appreciate. So thanks for
that
coming
really
on.
means a lot to me. And, the one thing that I think is important about TA is somebody needs to base it back in something. So if you find somebody that does Elliott wave theory, or they're a student of Gann, or in my case, Richard Wyckoff, like at least we have some fundamental basis in a centuries worth of a skill. So it's not just something that we see now where people are just drawing lines on charts, and I'm very honest with my people who are, who respect what I do. I look at trend lines as tertiary alongside all my other analysis. There's so much that I didn't even get into today, because it would have just been excess. And I like to focus on the priorities here. So I appreciate you having me on, man. And I hope that whatever I went through today wasn't too complicated and also has utility for your community.
I think it was incredibly valuable. Thanks again, man. Hey, everybody, if you're watching this on the replay, like, subscribe, Waters above. Great guy. I'll let you go, buddy.
Yeah, man. And we'll connect maybe before Rosh Hashanah.
Sounds like that'd be a good time, right? See if the prophecy was fulfilled yet again.
All right, brother. Much love. Take care.
Later, man. All righty. So there you have it. Not the most bullish news in the near term, right? And there you have a technical analyst perspective, someone who I actually respect in the space, showing you the worst case scenario again from a technical side of view, right? I tried to overlay the worst case scenario from a fundamental side of view, and basically came to the conclusion, right, that PulseChain can't be shut off, Hex can't be shut off. The worst case scenarios would not kill these products. So in conclusion, guys, anyone watching, I think what it's going to come down to, what the TA, the FA, whatever floats your boat, whatever cup of tea you're into, what it's going to come down to is the community and the conviction that we all have together. And when I do look around, I do see more builders, more content creators. I see people doubling down on their beliefs, standing by their convictions, defending their community, defending their bags, and building, which is really the most important thing out of all of this. I don't see anybody stopping and capitulating, minus the few perhaps weak hands or whales, weak-handed whales that we've been seeing exit. This needs to happen, right? The people that don't believe, they need to exit before we can have a complete reversal. So that's just human nature, right? The bear market's only over when the last of the sellers have sold. When you look at cycles coming into play in September, mid-September, maybe even to mid-October, be prepared for more downside, but be optimistic that we can save ourselves from that downside by not entering no man's land and then continuing a recovery sooner rather than later. With a violent move down in the next month or two, at least that wouldn't be stretching out a painful span of a year or more, right, of downside. So be ready for anything. Be ready to buy the dip if you believe. If a lot of this was too scary, if you're not ready for more downside, if you don't believe in this for the long term, then it might not be the place to be right now, right? Crypto in general might not be the place. Me personally, I believe for a long time. I've always believed in this ecosystem. I will continue to for a very long time. I'm optimistic, trying to be realistic as well for everybody. It helps to know that a long-term mindset is what really works. Okay, so if you have a long-term mindset, if you see where the community is going, where I believe the community is going, if you see the positivity and the direction that this could go, the potential that this could have, it's going to be a function of all of us at the end of the day. I'm still in this for the long term. My beliefs haven't shaken. My conviction hasn't shaken. Just be ready for, potential buying opportunities within the next month or two, right? 2 months from now, hopefully we're going to be seeing brighter times. So like, subscribe if that was valuable to you, and we'll see you on the next video.